Welcome back to another video by the Wolf of Partimento, the silverback of figured bass. Please excuse that in this one it may happen that I entangle myself in unrelated topics. Let's go. Turning an original bass line into a partimento is probably one of the most efficient exercises you can do when studying Baroque music in general, as the advantages of this procedure are most obvious. Decomposing an original piece into its bass line and then putting it together again into a new piece of music forces you to reassess and reflect on many decisions the original composer made. And of course you're diving much deeper than you would if you're just analyzing it. What I'm doing in this little video is to take a Corellian slow movement and turn it into two different doubles. What the heck is a double, you might ask? A double usually is a single variation on a preceding piece, most likely to be found in a Baroque dance suite. It describes the compositional procedure of transforming a given musical structure into a more figurative one, and I guess the term originally was referring to that specific diminution ratio, but when you checked out several doubles you'll actually see all kinds of proportions. Now on the bass line. It is a short, slow movement taken from Corelli's Trio Sonatas Opus 1. And as always in Corelli's music, everything works just like an oiled gearbox, where the individual elements interact into a minimalistic but flawless mechanism. When reduced to its backbones, it looks like this, and one of the most prominent features of this little piece is 4 double cadences. If you really want to know how this piece is put together and how the double cadence makes a key feature of Baroque composition, I made an exhaustive video on it that I still consider to be one of my most valuable videos on the channel, and I dropped a big bundle with breakdown sheets and exercises on this device on my Patreon page. Link is in the description. Taking the Corelli original as template, I created 2 different doubles from it. The first one is a pen and paper creation, so you're gonna see a score that I can discuss. The second one emerged just from keyboard jamming, so it's rather more an improvisational thing. Let's start with the composed one. The texture of this piece isn't really Italian, but rather more inspired by that little prelude-ish pieces by François Couperin. The main difficulty is to maintain the ongoing rhythm and to find legitimate melodic solutions within this framework, because it'll damage the overall impression if you just drop out of the rhythmic continuity, which enforces reflection on melodic plausibility. As this piece contains a lot of cadences, it'll become too static if you stress this aspect too much, so I went for an imperfect cadence in the first line, and in all the following authentic cadences I tried to weaken the incisions by putting suspensions on the local final to keep up the flow. When the final cadence comes close, something special's gotta happen, and I see a lot of my students missing out on this aspect, so I want to explain my thoughts on this. I'm trying to rise the tension by a special sonority, which is this kind of augmented triad, built on the local leading tone that emerges from an accented passing note. This chord leads into its tonic but containing the 9th, which wasn't indicated in the original score and that I just added. I stretched out the very last cadence by a prolonged 4/3 suspension and released the accumulated tension via this descending scale, which is a rhetorical figure that some historically informed music theorists would refer to as tirata. Let's just listen to the final again. Now let's listen to the keyboard creation. focus just on the final, as I was going for a similar idea to create a certain climax, but with slightly different vehicles. I went for a bigger voicing already on the C minor cadence, and right after that changed the register to a higher, hitherto unused pitch level, from which I drew as well a descending scale in more rapid notes, quite similar to the preceding realization, but this time in the right hand. Listen. Okay, I guess it's time for a little story, cause I got a special connotation with the double genre. When I hear the term double, the first thing that comes to my mind is this recording of Bach's solos for violin by Gidon Kremer that fell into my hands when I was in my late teens. And back in the day when music streaming wasn't really a thing yet, the listening habits have been a little different. I was living in a small German town called Minden, and I had a pal that I was visiting on a regular basis in the far out backwater, pretty much on the opposite side of town, just to hang out on the weekends. On my shreddy bike, this took me about 1 hour and 15 minutes one direction. So I had enough time not just to think about the girls, but as well to listen to music, and it became a routine to put the Kremer on. Bach conceptualized the B minor sonata in a way that every single of the 4 movements is provided with an additional double, and I had like a morbid obsession with the double of the courant. And I remember one particular night where I was on my bike trip pumping this very track from door to door on loop for 1 hour and 15 minutes straight. As I said, different listening habits. As I announced, a bit of a random episode, so just allow me a little comment on that improv, as this actually was a happy take that I didn't find too bad. One thing I like about it specifically is that it didn't contain any sequences. I guess everybody with a Partimento background is more or less prone to the bad habit of just letting the fingers go and come up with too many, too long, too boring sequences, up to a degree where the musical outcome becomes insufferable. So at the moment I'm consciously trying to reduce the amount of sequential motion in my improvisations. Let's listen. Now that I praise myself for being able to play 50 seconds without doing a circle of fifths, I want to take the occasion to make a somewhat controversial point. Although my original analysis in the Corelli video tried to show that there is a tight net of schematic building blocks, I'm actually pretty ambivalent about the assumption that music can be broken down into an irreducible succession of schemata, and to me personally, this notion seems more and more like a positivistic hallucination. In hindsight, some portions in the Gerdingen, which I still consider a brilliant book of course, appear to me like a constrained attempt to demonstrate the comprehensive, all-encompassing nature of the applied methodology, suggesting that there is nothing more in between, which is, as we all know, not the case, although the number of schemata was already immense in the book and in the aftermath, for example in this publication, grew into absurd dimensions. It is of course not just a great mental relief and actually an undebatable necessity for an aspiring improviser to comprehend music as a succession of syntactical building blocks. But this is of course still an abstraction that's not able to provide an accurate model of musical reality, which becomes just too obvious when yet you try to transfer this model too literally into musical practice. Everything becomes a stale, foreseeable stream of boredom. That's at least how I perceive it. What about you?